My name is Melissa Garland. I'm the VP of Marketing for Atlas RTX, and this is the, fourth, let's just say latest in our webinar series that we have been doing, offering insights from home building industry leaders. And today we're titling our webinar Red, Yellow, Green, Marketing Tactics and Success Stories for Economic Reopening. And I'm excited to welcome our guests from Group 2, so Mollie Elkman, the owner and president. Hi, Mollie. And Matt Riley, the vice president of Group 2. These guys are a fantastic marketing services agency that focuses on new home builders. So, and we also have our very own Bassem Salem, CEO of Atlas RTX. Welcome, Bassem.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, as always, gang, questions will be taken throughout. You're welcome to put them in the chat or in the Q&A bar. Either one, we'll keep a watch out and raise them as we go. But I would like to make sure all of our audience, I think a lot of us know all of us in this space, but let's give it a quick introduction. Mollie, you want to tell us a little bit about Group 2 and your role there?
Sure. So Group 2 is a marketing company that works with home builders. We've been in business for 51 years, and I am a second generation business owner. So I've owned the company for about 10 years, and we work with builders all over.
Fantastic. And Matt?
Yes, I am the, they call me the vice president. I think I'm the janitor. I have been in this industry for 17 years. Started off in new home sales as a salesperson, and just kind of worked in several different markets and love helping builders all over the country. The most interesting thing about me, I think happened this morning. I listened to my kids wrestling in the living room, and one of my boys said, "Snitches get stitches." Oh. So, yeah, so we raise them right over here.
On the streets of suburban Raleigh.
That's right.
That's very fun. So
this is like she doesn't know what to say at all. Well, I just want to know what they've been watching.
Derailed is all that's just happened to this webinar. Back on track. Sorry, Melissa.
Well, I mean, it worries me more about what's happening to my two teenage boys that I have not been paying attention to. So there's that insight. Sam, tell us a little bit about Atlas RTX.
I'm going to keep it lighthearted as well. I'm Bassem Salem, CEO of Atlas RTX. I can't believe, Mollie, you said 51 years. That's amazing. Our company's 5 years old, which in tech is kind of a teenager, right? We're not completely new. We focus on AI-based marketing, sales, and service solutions for home building. 80% of our clients are home building. This is our ecosystem, and we love it. And to follow Matt's lead, something few people know about me is I did a year of ballet, a year of modern dance, and was on the ballroom dance team, all to woo my wife.
Oh, I love that.
That is dedication.
And I haven't danced since then.
We're going to need to see some evidence.
Oh my goodness. All right.
I need a video.
Oh boy.
Well, Melissa's really disturbed now.
There's so much follow-up to be done on this webinar. We haven't even started. Let's get into the real reason people have joined us, and thank you all for joining us today again. Which is, we wanted to talk about shifts in homebuyer sentiment, right? So what we've all seen is that, you know, as and experienced ourselves as participants, unwilling participants in this crisis, is the shift in the way we experience our lives, experience our world, right? And it of course affects home buyer feelings and sentiment and behavior. And so we want to start with a little bit about the data, what we are seeing in the market. And a lot of that we've been able to derive from some of the technology that all of us use in our businesses. So Matt, we wanted to start with you and have you kind of share briefly what you've been seeing in the new home market marketing data, and can you walk us through a few key points there on customer sentiment shifts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's really made this different than the last time meaning 08, 09 era, is the technology that we have at our disposal. It is the ability to track what's happening in real time. And Chris, if you wouldn't mind bringing that chart up, I can walk through that. But really what we've been doing is once this whole thing started, is keeping an understanding of what the consumer sentiment is. Especially, one of the ways that we used to measure that was walk-in traffic. And that's been the case with general real estate, like walk-in traffic to open houses and to listings and things like that. But when we get into a position where we physically can't have walk-in traffic, we've got to default to what I would call old faithful, which is internet traffic, right? Like traffic coming into websites. And in this case, this is aggregated in from home builders all across the country. Almost every state in the United States is represented here. But you've got two. I'm going to keep this really, really simple because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Dark blues this year, light blues last year. And we're going from March 1st through the end of April. And we're seeing what we saw was about a 30 to 35% decline on or around March the 9th or 10th, because that was a 12-month peak that we saw rolling backwards. And then once this kind of the COVID became a reality for our country, we started to see that decline. And interestingly enough, it was on or about the time that the NBA suspended its season and Disney closed its parks. So that would represent just on the other side of that second hill there. And then all the way down to the bottom, that was about a 10-day slide. And so, which we really anticipated happening. We just didn't know how far it was going to slide. And thankfully, we actually never crossed below 2019 levels, right? So, and the reason that's important is because 2019 was the best year we had seen in a decade. So it's really important to keep that in comparison. When I always talk about whether you're selling something or you're marketing, it's always what you have compared to what. So when we're looking at that information, it's how do we compare it to the previous measurable time period? And 2019 being the best year we'd had in a decade, knowing that those numbers didn't slide below that was really key. And then to see that we've had slow and steady growth. It hasn't been this giant check shape or V-shaped up, but week over week, we've had essentially continual week over week growth all the way up through the end of the month. And even into yesterday, we're still seeing that same pattern, and we're up at or above pre-downturn, pre-COVID levels. So the consumer sentiment, the consumer interest is still there. And we are seeing all across the country in every single market, the customers who are still active or still actively searching for homes, the ones that are gainfully employed, they are absolutely still moving forward in the home buying process. And I think that's a really important piece to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And Sam, we've got some similar data from customers using chatbot technology, right? What is it that you've been seeing in the data trends there?
Absolutely, and it absolutely mimics what Matt's data at Group 2 is showing. So I won't repeat that. What I would like to do is sort of put labels to it, because I think it captures the sentiment not just of home buyers but of America in general. With all due respect, I really feel like we started this out in the U.S. in let's call it the middle of February with sort of a sense of apathy, not really being sure what was happening, if this was something that was going to impact us or not. And apathy is a bit of a strong word because I think we all have empathy for those elsewhere. But I think in terms of changing our day-to-day lives, we didn't do much. We certainly started seeing the decline of traffic, the drop of traffic early, and I'll call this our stage, our denial stage. This can't be happening. And then the shock of, oh my gosh, and it's, Matt, you're exactly right. We saw it's almost exactly 10 days. March 8th to March 17th is where the fall happened, and the sort of reality of the situation. Now, interestingly, our data did show, it certainly did show a little bit of a rise, but it was essentially flat at the bottom there. I'm going to call it the Valley of Despair. It sounds cool. But there was sort of that last 2 weeks. That last 2 weeks of March before April 1st, I mean, we sensed it. We sensed it talking to clients. We sensed it talking to colleagues, other CEOs. That period was pretty difficult for all of us. And it's as if something happened on April Fool's Day. For our data, ever since then, every day has been incrementally higher than the day before, and we called this hope. As we approach sort of the middle of April. And then as of last week, we updated the data to show that it's continued. But now, and this is this alludes to Matt's comment, we're actually higher than we were before. And I think this is beyond just hope and optimism. I think there's a shift. There's a shift in the way we treat the internet and the web as a really critical storefront for us. And I think we'll talk about some of that today. So that's what we saw.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to think about it that way. And in fact, we keep talking as a company and as a group about how shifts seem to be daily, right? Like every day something new seems to be happening. And yet, you know, we're kind of wondering how, we all would love to know what's going to come. We'd all like some more reliability. We all expect certain things to happen, and then sometimes they don't. And this shift that you're speaking to, Bassem, may be pointing to this idea. There was an article today, and I wanted to raise it with this group in the Wall Street Journal that was questioning, why is it that housing prices aren't declining? That, you know, what's happening in this market that you would expect, where it seems logical, right? That you would see a decline in housing prices, and yet that's not happening. Do either of you or any of you have a perspective on this? And
I think we all do.
Oh, I've got plenty of opinion.
Yeah, I think the main thing is people hear recession and they think housing, and anything that is going on right now has nothing to do with housing. So we already, going into this, had low inventory. So when it's a low inventory market, you don't have to lower prices because there aren't enough homes. So I never thought prices would go down.
right.
Yeah, I think, like you said, Molly, it really comes into a very simple supply and demand model, coupled with a couple other pieces, right? So I think that we've seen obviously a dip in interest rates. We have, again, historically low interest rates, which helps offset some of that affordability issue that we've been building up over the past couple of years in our, in our industry as a whole. So, and then on top of that, really strained inventory levels as people are taking their homes off the market, so it really comes into, all right, well, what can I get? And these houses are going so fast because people are realizing what their quote unquote pain is, the justification for them thinking they would like to move is now amplified, intensified because of the scenario that we're in, right? Oh, well, I'd like to have a little bit extra space. And then when you have 4 or 5 people in the house all at once, all day long, I really feel like I need a lot more space. Or, I'm posted up on my kitchen counter with my laptop trying to work a full day. And I've got my kids in the background trying to work on school. I got all this other stuff happening. It would be really, really nice to have a dedicated place in my home where I could go and be uninterrupted for work. So not that anybody has felt any of that during this, right? So I think all of those factor into that not being a housing problem and why we haven't seen a decline in prices. And one last thing is, I also think as builders, we have to dial in. We talk about messaging for our marketing all the time. We also have to dial in our messaging for our sales team, because you've got the opportunistic buyer that comes in because they're fresh off, quote unquote, fresh off a 2008, 2009 housing financial-led recession, where you immediately saw housing pricing plummet. And so that's in the back of their mind, and we're coming into this, and they're like, oh, well, there's a deal to be had, and not understanding that this is a controlled environment. We've done this to ourselves on purpose to help rid this scenario. And so understanding and being the salespeople to be able to talk a customer through what that looks like and understand that this is not a housing problem is really, really imperative to getting over that and helping buyers come to that realization that, and they still have a pain. They still have a reason, and even more of a reason to want to move, and not because of a perceived deal.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying that I think when the new home designs start including an education room, then we've got a real problem. Real shift in the way things are done. Sam, do you have a perspective on where we think buyers sentiment is going to go from here? Are they going to?
Well, I would love to build on this topic for just a second, if that's okay, Melissa, because Matt sort of alluded to it, but I'd love to follow it a bit. And that is that even if this market as a whole, even if the number of real estate transactions this year were to shrink a little from an aggregate perspective, even if it were. I think what's really incredible here, to your point, Matt, if 30, 40, 50% of existing homes are being taken off the market because we don't want people coming into our houses right now until we get a little past this, then could this be an incredible opportunity for new home sales? Because proportionately, we can show new homes. Home builders have no problem showing homes. They can keep them clean, they're fresh, right? No one lives there. So what if the proportion of transactions goes from, let's just use rough numbers, 10% new versus 90% existing, to 10 to 20% new versus 80% existing? We can double the proportion. Even if it's 10 or 20% smaller, new home sales can actually go up in the coming 6-12 months. And I really think that is potentially a short-term opportunity for new home builders.
I agree. I think we have the opportunity to double our market share percentage-wise across the country as a whole, and really come out, like you said, we could see housing like total units be constricted lower, but our side of the industry actually grow.
Exactly.
And there is a lot of information out there that can be hard to digest, just because it does include used homes in those numbers. So, even like Zillow put out a little bit of data the other day, and it wasn't necessarily very positive. It just wasn't specific to new construction. So, you really have to look at what you're reading and kind of digest it.
Makes a lot of sense. So what we wanted to get to today, though, is this question of reopening, right? Markets, economies are slowly starting to reopen. We at Atlas RTX are here in Utah, one of the states that never really did a state mandated full shutdown. And yet, we all went indoors and have been indoors for 6 weeks, and many for longer. But now they are phasing in the reopenings. So it looks different for every economy, what that stage is, how they're represented and defined. But phasing is what's happening. That's the way to go, it seems, right? So, and Mollie, you're saying at group 2 that you're recommending a kind of phased approach for an overall marketing strategy. Could you talk to us about your philosophy and approach there?
Yeah, I think anytime there are unknowns, you want to have some sense of control. At least I do. And I think the one thing that we know now is that this tiered approach is happening. It's not going to happen at the same time in every market, but it is going to happen. So that is something from a marketing standpoint, we can finally be ahead and be ready to adjust our marketing accordingly. I do think that all of us are getting sick of being at home. I think there's a lot of, everyone is kind of towards their breaking point. It's, from being home for so long. And it's important that our marketing message is the right message. I think people are, overloaded with webinars, just like they're overloaded with talk of COVID-19. They want something positive to look forward to. And by having this tiered approach, we can make sure that the message is the right one based on that specific county.
And then, Matt, are you guys creating distinct strategies or somewhat distinct strategies by phase for your clients?
Yeah, so we're, one of the things that as the different states and the different counties, local governments go even down to sometimes the local cities inside of the county, the county guidelines are having their own kind of layout. And so we're trying to have a similar approach, because like Mollie was saying, there's this pent up demand already of just simply, I want to get out. There was an interesting article we can talk about a little bit later too, but just about how Apple Maps data is showing that people are calling the stay-at-home lockdown over, no matter what the government says, because it's showing that based on our phone data that people are on the move. They're going to places that are open. They're going where they can go. And so our messaging as a whole should let people know how they can do business with us, where we're open, when we're open, what our policies are, and according to that. And so we've really put together kind of a 3-phase which is very similar to what most states are doing. So hence the title of today's episode,
Yes.
you know, red, yellow, green, because it starts with that messaging of, okay, if we're in red, that means you're like, we're literally not going anywhere. But clearly, so we have to have messaging for that. And clearly, as we transition into where we're at now, which is yellow going into some green in certain areas, we have to have dedicated and prepared messages for that to make sure that the consumer is well aware. Molly, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, if it's all right, we'll come, because we do want to dig deep into each one of those.
Yeah,
Kristen,
let's show some
and,
examples.
And before we go
Yeah.
there, I just wanted to kind of add on to that. Sam, we've been talking here about reopening technology from even a chatbot perspective. What are we seeing is kind of customized needs for clients in tech, and maybe in our tech in particular, in the reopening phase?
Absolutely. I think for both red and yellow especially, but I think even the new green will involve this. But for red and yellow, I see three themes that are absolutely critical. The first is the website as a really critical storefront, 24/7, 365. I think if we thought it was important before, we really know it's important now. Website is so critical, and access to you as a home builder. The second is we all as consumers now expect what I'm going to call on-demand buying. I want to buy on my terms, when I want to. It's on demand when I need it, which then forces number three, for us to respond, we need to do what we'll refer to as remote selling. I wish I had a fancier word, but in order to respond to the other side, the on-demand, we need to be able to sell remotely. We need to be able to engage with our clients, our home buyers remotely. So each of those components can introduce the need for automation in a really in a really palpable way. The storefront, if it's open 24/7, 365, chat assistants for online sales counselors make absolute sense. You need something there to cover the 24/7, 365 and support that. And we actually recently, to sort of support the market, we introduced a really affordable offering we were calling web to text sales RTX. It's a component that we can stick there and basically transition a conversation to a text messaging live chat. For on-demand buying, you need tools that allow you to have remote access. So things like UTour and others that can let people see the home when they want to see it. And then finally, with remote selling really means I need to be able to engage that person, even if they're in the home now and I'm not in the home now. How do I do that? Are we going to pick up the phone? Are we really going to FaceTime live? Or are we going to do what we all want to do when we engage one another, unless we're on a webinar? And that is to message each other, text message each other. So there are all sorts of cool capabilities we can enable a salesperson, OSC, or a field sales, community salesperson, to be able to engage that buyer when they're in the home over messaging.
Yeah.
So there are lots and lots of things that we can do to help this new world.
Permanent shifts in the way we do things, I think.
Yeah, and the builders have to be able to work in the way that the buyer wants. So you have to have the process and the tech in place to really let the buyer guide the way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's exactly right. I think that's a fantastic segue, because as we said, we'd like to go a little bit deeper and more specific into these red, yellow, green phases, particularly from a marketing strategy, messaging, content perspective. So Molly, I was wondering if you could start us off by talking about the red phase and what it looks like for your customers at this stage, your clients. What are the key messages that you're suggesting they employ? And maybe you have some examples to share with folks about what your clients are doing in this phase.
Perfect. Yep. Chris, I have those examples. And then, so we have already been to the red phase. I really hope we're not coming back, but we should be prepared if we do have to go back for whatever reason down the road. The main thing for the red phase is that the sentiment was really just this uncertainty. That if we do have to go back into the red phase, I think people have now been through this once, and it may not have that same level of uncertainty. But what it looked like for the builders who really adjusted swiftly to this stay-at-home order was really just communicating very, very quickly with their buyers of how they could continue to work with them. And just making it very clear, essentially, the message is we're all in this together. I don't think we literally want to say we're all in this together because we're all over that message. But it's just a quick shift to these remote appointments. And then the biggest thing is, marketing shifts don't have to be a totally new campaign, throw out everything you're doing. It could literally be as easy as changing your call to action. So I know we have a couple other examples here. Even just, and the idea of all being in this together, showing that you support local businesses, that has been something that has been really helpful. I know it's something that people care about. People care about their small businesses that are a part of their community, and being able to, have a Zoom meeting over pizza and support a small business is a really nice, different message for a builder to be able to put out there. And then I think we have, and this is going to transition into into any phase. Like, you have to make sure that people know how they can work with you. And it's no longer just come out and see us. That call to action is changed forever. It will now be all the different ways that buyers can work with you, and showing that really they're the one in control. They get to decide whether that is, by text message, by video conference, by coming in. I mean, the builder's job is to make it as easy as possible for the buyer.
Yeah. And are there any key shifts in channel strategies or I mean, we talked about messaging, but or I don't know, outbound marketing efforts that you found that builders did, especially in the red phase? Did they scale way back on certain things, or did you recommend that and scale up on others?
So it really depended on the builder and what their position was. We had some builders who just didn't have a lot of cash and had to make some really aggressive adjustments, not just for their marketing, but for their entire team. And then we had many more builders who really wanted to continue to get their message out there and just changed their call to action and made sure that everything was driving people to the website and really just updated their marketing. Yeah. We have a lot of builders that increased their marketing spend as well.
Yeah. We saw a big jump from even updating some of the most basic messaging that you see out there from a retargeting perspective of display campaigns. We saw a couple 100% increase in click-through rates simply by changing the call to action to virtual appointments available. Just making it really clean and simple. Don't clutter up the message. Don't make people guess what you're trying to get them to do. Make it really clean and direct, and they click through. I mean, we're talking 200, 300% increases in some basic marketing fundamentals, right? Some of these weren't like reinventing the wheel here. It was tying into understanding what the data tells us and then making sure that your creative and your messaging match up with what you're being told you should do.
Right. And one thing I want to add to the red phase is some builders were advised or decided to just go silent. And what that did, now that we're getting out of the red phase, is it made people question if that company was going to make it through. And that is not something that people want to think about with their builder. Are they struggling? Are they going to close? So saying nothing is really, cutting your marketing is never the right answer. And I think that the people who did that are going to look back and not be happy that they made that decision.
Interesting. And it occurs to me that, we all tend to see the world from where we happen to be sitting at that moment in time. So if we aren't in a market that's red right now, and as I say, we here in Utah are actually kind of transitioning out, and there are many markets that are talking about transitioning out. Meantime, there are some that are still fairly, still locked down, right? So, and we've talked already about the fact that people are behaving as if, but the markets in some places, the building is not, construction is not allowed, and those sorts of things. So I assume you would advise those folks who are still in the red that this is a good planning time. Yeah. B,
so I don't think many people are still in the red, just because there are a lot of restrictions in different markets. But even here in my market, I'm in Philadelphia, construction is moving forward. Construction is, you can sell homes, and there are just regulations that have to be followed. But I think the real adjustment to that red phase was really just quickly adjusting the call to action. I think most of the country is now more to the yellow phase.
okay. Well, let's
Do you
go
agree
there.
with that, Matt?
Yeah, no, I do agree. I mean, there are definitely, if you look at the state guidelines, they say X, and then you've got some counties that are more dense than others that have some tighter restrictions in what the state recommendations are. But still, like, even you can still get out, even like Durham County, which is a neighboring county for us, and here in Raleigh, they even had it to where they were more strict. You could still show homes, but once a day, it was like one person in at a time. Now they've kind of, lessened that a little bit, where it can be, 3 times a day, more people can be in and out. So, those kind of things are in place. But yeah, I think that for the majority of us, we're definitely in the yellow phase. However, I think it's really prudent to make sure that we hang on to our red phase philosophy and stuff that's ready to go in case certain areas of the country have to pull back a little bit for shorter periods of time.
Yeah.
But the key is that we've seen success in selling homes remotely.
Yeah.
Even in the red.
It's proven, even with 55 plus buyers. So even if people have to go back home, you can still sell remotely. And I think that has shifted our industry forever.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. And I wanted to go from there then. And actually, I did want to say to anybody who's listening, any of our webinar viewers, if you yourselves, be curious to know if any of you are in markets where things are still fairly red, whether you're, construction's suspended in any way or whatever, maybe throw us a comment in the chat. So it would be interesting to hear. But let's shift into the yellow phase, which I think does seem to be, or sometimes it's orange, right? There's a new orange along the way between red and yellow that people are talking about. What does that look like? What are your clients doing?
Yeah, so I personally feel like, even though I'm in a restricted area for movement, mentally I'm in the yellow phase, which is really a sentiment of looking forward. It's more aspirational, empowering, wanting your buyer to feel in control of anything, at this time. So the idea here is, you get to decide what your future looks like. This is really, Matt was talking earlier about like pain points. It is okay here to address those pain points. We talked about, having that home office that you don't have right now, the art of working remotely. If you scroll down, Chris, I think we have a couple more examples of this phase. And really addressing those pain points head on. Fresh views and fresher air. If you have, you're building out, lake homes, really tapping into that message without just, saying anything related to COVID, or, you don't have to say anything about COVID to get the point across. So the joy of cooking with new appliances, your own private outdoor oasis, really talking about the benefits of your product and a more of a product-driven message and how it can benefit someone's life while knowing what those pain points are in their existing home right now. And then, of course, interest rates, this is a message that's going to carry through. But surprisingly, we haven't seen many builders really educating buyers at this point in time. And I think, sharing this information is always going to be important.
I think on the interest rate side, Molly and gang, like one of the reasons is there was a little bit of fear about sharing interest rate because there's a lot of volatility happening with rates, as the Fed came in and, injected a lot of cash. There was some things that were happening, like we're not going to get it into because it's well over my pay grade, how the back end of the mortgage industry works. But there were a lot of servicer issues coming up with the, being able to have forbearances and things like that, that was causing interest rates. At one point, they were at 5% for like a day, and then they fell back down. So we couldn't use that natural urgency that we're so used to using in housing, especially as, over the past few years about low rates. We weren't able to do that, but now we can. So that's settled back in, and rates, if you've got good credit, you can get a 3% 30-year fixed mortgage. So those are really big, important factors that we have to make sure that we're doing, educating, like you said, Molly, home shoppers and home buyers on what that is. And there were some stats just came out the other day from the Mortgage Bankers Association about purchase applications has surged up 13, 14, 15%. So that's always a great leading indicator.
Yeah, that's great. Good. Well, let's go from there to where we all hope we're going sooner rather than later, safely and safely.
Yep.
So
Chris,
green, I don't know, safe is like the big question, right? Because you've raised it already, Molly, which is, that's the threat that's out there right now. If the fear and uncertainty that remains is until we have a vaccine, can we truly feel safe?
Yeah. And I really believe that, people are starting to assess their risk management a little more liberally. People are sick of being at home. We're seeing that with people moving around a little bit more. If you think about it, are you still cleaning and wiping down and washing your hands quite as much as you were in the first few weeks? Probably not. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying, people are kind of at their limit. I know for us, we're in our 8th week of being at home. So, the green phase to me is really about, again, it's always about the buyer and empowering the buyer and communicating with them so that they don't even have to ask the questions.
Yeah.
And, the sentiment in the green phase is essentially, yes, caution, but more curiosity of what the new normal, I hate to use that, but I have to say it, what it's going to look like. Adjusting to wearing a mask, or adjusting to seeing these safety signs, or whatever the new regulations are. And what I really want to challenge people to do is don't just take the CDC, whatever your requirement is that you have to do in order to operate your job site. Don't just post that in a window. Remember that everything you put in front of a consumer is marketing. So if you can tell this story in a way that makes them feel confident in you as a company, but is also meeting the requirements by your county, then you want to make it look nice. You want to match your look and feel, your words that you use. So that's really what the message is for the green phase, is just peace of mind, health, wellness, the value of new. I know we saw someone comment about how many team members or how far apart people had to be. We're seeing that there are definitely restrictions on the building side, but buyers can still buy and they can still look. And I think by really owning that message of safety, it brings trust to the relationship. And it's a big opportunity for our entire industry to steal market share, like we were talking about, from used homes. Because guess what? If some of these used homes go back on the market, which they will, new is looking a lot better. It's looking, clean and safe and fresh. And, it's more than just the floors creaking when you walk through a used home. It's every single aspect of new is going to be more appealing than ever.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Any other, are you seeing clients then that are already using this kind of messaging, that they're already beginning to speak to the world this way, and what kind of results they're having from that?
So all of our builders who are back on the job site have done some type of window cling or signage, just showing that they are taking it seriously and that they are following guidelines, because the last thing you want to do is get back on the job site and then have things shut down. So, it is a good way to start getting that message out there.
Yeah. Bassem, we've been talking a bit about what we think customers are going to want, or people are going to want to do. as the economies start to reopen. Now I'm moving us out of home building and a little bit into like tourism and local travel, right? What's your sense of what the new green phase of customer sentiment will be, and what kind of technology will be needed to respond to it?
You know, as Molly and Matt were going through the stages, I was really realizing the parallel again in consumers in general, where it's really about fixing variables. That is, we're in red. Everything was uncertain. We had no idea how bad it was going to get, how long it was going to be, what it would mean. Everything was open. Every variable was open. And now as we transition to yellow, there's still a lot of uncertainty for us all, but quite a few variables are now fixed. We do know that if this happens, we can do this about it, and we can go back and tighten for one area over another. That's more than we as consumers felt comfortable with 6 weeks ago. In fact, 6 weeks ago, we were hearing numbers like 250,000 people could pass in this country alone. We now hopefully, I think, believe that that number is much, much smaller. It's still a horrible number, but we had no idea 6 weeks ago, and now we're sort of refining. So I feel like there's this sentiment of fixing these variables, and as Molly was alluding, as what used to seem like a shock becomes normal. Like I can do that. I can wear the silly mask. No worries. I can put on a mask and go here or do that. I can wash my hands twice as often as I was before. We can get past this, and as the shock disappears, I do think that the yellow and the green sort of represents our level of certainty around the uncertain. I do think that there are variables like does tourism, for example, become, not that we want to spend too much time on other industries, but does tourism become much more local? We will get on a plane to go to Italy and have that great trip there from maybe not quite right away, but down the road. But will we do it as often? Or might we think, you know, I can drive somewhere 4 hours away and have a safer experience? So I do think our behaviors, that's still the question mark for all of us. Exactly how much will that change? I'm struggling to believe that we won't fly anymore. That just doesn't make sense to me. We're going to fly. We're going to fly. We're all going to need homes. So you know, there are fundamental things that I think are not shifting. And I think over the coming 2 months, we get to green whether we like it or not, because we get to green because we will answer these questions. We will start having more clarity around those variables.
I think that's great. And in the last minute we have, Matt, do you want to kind of bring us home with what's the guidance that you would offer to listeners about, you know, actionable steps so that you would recommend, like, based on this shifts that we've assessed today? Where would you guide home builders today?
So first, I would say we have to absolutely invest in ourselves from a content perspective, right? So we were just talking about this in our team meeting this morning, and that is, we have to make sure that it is okay to talk about product. It is okay to be selling right now, but we have to invest in the content side of that. No more colored, watercolor renderings. Those are not going to do. We have to put ourselves in a position to be able to continue to move forward if we have to move backwards, right? So we get a pass. So I think as an industry, we get a pass this time around. A lot of us weren't ready. A lot of us were caught off guard, but we won't get a pass. You got to think that there is a high likelihood that we may not be going all the way back to red in the fall, but there, from what we know so far, this could change tomorrow, but what we know so far is there will probably be another wave come through in the fall, and we have to be prepared to be able to adjust to that so we can continue to move the ball down the field. And it starts with content. It's like, what's more important, marketing, websites, or content? It's like what's came first, chicken or the egg? Because you can't have any of these things. And the same thing on the technology front. So is your technology stack appropriate? I've had so many conversations with home builders in so many different markets, And every single one of them are reevaluating their tech stack. They're saying I'm not even close to being prepared to be able to work and sell virtually / remotely, and making sure that you've got the people power, the buy-in, and all of those things to be able to put all that in place.
Yeah.
So those are the things.
I think that's great advice. And I really appreciate the thoughtful approach that you guys have taken and led us in this conversation, taking the phasing that we've seen in governments and economies and applying it to how we think about our business in the home building space. And so I want to thank you. I want to thank you, Mollie and Matt, for joining us on your second webinar today, I think, and sharing these ideas with us. And thank you all. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.